Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies. And today I want to tell you about some of the weirdest and darkest movies you can currently watch with your Prime Video membership.
When I see you, I see blood in the water. Run deep, it runs deep. Blood in the water. I see blood in the water. Try me, you see blood in the water.
So welcome to another video of Prime Video recommendations, and these recommendations, not unlike this shirt, are not for everyone. Because I know a lot of you will ask, there's a link to where you can get this shirt if you like it in the description below, along with links to more videos, Patreon, channel memberships, and today's sponsor, Universal Yums, but we'll talk more about them later in the video. Let's go ahead and start with my number 10 pick, which is the new release currently available on Prime Video, called Vivarium. This stars Jesse Eisenberg and Imogen Poots, and they are trapped inside the Vivarium, which is this maze of homes, like row homes. They all look the same, and they cannot get out. Now, if that seems like a spoiler, not only is it the marketing of the movie, they give this away in just the first few minutes, but this really does turn into something not just terrifying, but extremely dark. I mean, it's basically a metaphor for sort of being like trapped in suburbia, and it is grim stuff. People have tried to do this before. I think Vivarium is one of the darkest takes on it, and it's all the way at the back because it's kind of hard to watch. They end up sort of getting saddled with this baby, which again is sort of given to you in the poster art for this movie, and this thing is awful. It's not human. It's just weird, and it's very, very cringy. I personally had a hard time getting through this one, but I did make it through because it was very interesting, not just in the style, but I was really trying to figure out, okay, what exactly is going on? You kind of get it, but your brain is still trying to piece together what exactly is happening, and it is really weird, really dark stuff. Like I said, not for everyone. That statement applies to everything on this list. Now, Pontypool was kind of a popular cult film about a radio show host where zombies start coming in. I'm not going to give away the twist of that movie, but a lot of people really like that movie. Hellmouth is from the same writer-director and has some of the same cast members, and it's very, very different. This looks a lot, I mean, almost identical to Sin City in the style. Most of the backgrounds, if not all of the backgrounds, are artificial, but they look really good. There are some monsters and stuff that don't look that great, but what this basically is sort of a take on like the 1950s drive-in type stuff, except it's just way darker than anything that would have come out in the 50s, but it's got kind of a pulpy, kind of fun style to it. But it is about just a descent into hell. A guy's literally sort of driving down the road and going deeper and deeper into hell. Very interesting stuff, but like I said, not for everybody. If anything that I've said interests you, including the mention of Pontypool, I think this one's well worth checking out. If none of that interests you, you're not going to like this movie. Now, in 1993, some of the most famous directors in horror did an anthology movie called Body Bags. Now, John Carpenter actually heads this up, and he plays this creepy coroner character, kind of like the Crypt Keeper that introduces each story. He does a great job. Tobe Hooper did part of this. He's most famous for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Sam Raimi, who's most famous for The Evil Dead, is in it, not necessarily involved, but has a cameo. Wes Craven has a cameo. So this is kind of a horror movie nuts dream movie, except it's not that great, okay? So it's fun to watch if you're into all of that, and the little stories are pretty fun too. It is a decent anthology movie, but being from the 90s, it's now become pretty dated, as I think horror anthologies have just gotten really, really good. This one's kind of silly, and to be frank, it's a little too goofy at times, but it is a fun watch. If you like that kind of stuff, especially the throwback stuff, you should definitely check this one out. Just don't have high expectations for it, given everyone who's involved in it. Now, my next pick is a longtime favorite of mine. It is a cult classic. It does have a very tight-knit cult following. It's called Bad Taste, and it's directed by none other than Peter Jackson. This is actually his first big movie, and I use the word big very lightly because this is a very low budget movie. He's in it. He plays multiple characters. He's a horrible actor. Most of the people in it are horrible actors. The special effects and stuff, I don't want to say they're horrible. They're actually pretty good when you consider the low budget of this movie. It's almost no budget. There's some pretty impressive special effects, but let's just be honest, they look like shit. And this one's got a very weird sort of slow tone to it in the first half, but it really does take off. There's aliens, there's vomit chugging. The house turns into a space shuttle. There's a massive shootout. I mean, it just turns into absolute chaos, and it is a ton of fun. And it's just unhinged movie fun. You can see the movie making process a little bit, especially when you know Peter Jackson, the director of the largest movie trilogy ever made in terms of production, The Lord of the Rings. When you see this small movie that he did, it's just really cool to me. I like all of his early work. It's not just cool that he made these little weird movies. They're cool on their own. Like, they got this really sort of fun, crazy, wild vibe. I'm a total geek for these. If it sounds remotely interesting to you, at least try it. You might find that you have like a palate for this type of stuff, but I know for a fact not everybody does, because this one's wild. So good things come to those who wait, usually. But really horrific things come to those who wait through the first sleep-inducing half of Come to Daddy. Now, I had a hard time hanging with this movie because the first half is almost like a little bit of a stage play. Elijah Wood plays a character who's visiting his estranged father at this beach house. It's a very remote beach house, basically in the middle of nowhere. And his father is played by Stephen McHattie, who also starred in Hellmouth and Pontypool. He's kind of a big name in the genre and a very, very good sort of dramatic, almost overly dramatic actor. And so the first half of this movie, and I mean the first half, it's a little bit of a snooze fest to this father and son trying to reconnect, and the father's very, very weird and eccentric and an alcoholic. So it is pretty dry, and also just like, where is this going? Like, I was really getting bored with it. And then once the tide turns on this movie, it really turns, and I really liked it. Now, that does not mean it's a strong recommendation. I did really enjoy the second half of this movie a lot. I kept thinking about it in the days that followed. So some of you are really gonna love it, but just keep in mind the theme of this particular video. It's not for everyone, but if you like stuff that's really weird and dark, just trust me, if you're getting bored with Come to Daddy, just wait for the halfway point. Maybe a little past the halfway point. It really does turn around. Speaking of waiting, every single month, I cannot wait for my new Universal Yums box to arrive. They are today's sponsor. I have been getting boxes from them for months now. We make an event out of it. My latest box is from Thailand, and when you sign up using the link in the description, you get a box like this every single month from a different part of the world, and it's loaded with snacks, chips, cookies, crackers, candy, all sorts of stuff I've never had, flavor profiles I've never tasted before. Me and my wife make a night of it. We open it up and we just sort of spend an hour, not just taste testing the snacks, which is fun, but there's also little games and facts about everything included in the box. It really is a fun experience, and there's so much. This is the big box. There's so much in it. It lasts for like 3 or 4 sessions of like snacking. It's at least, and that's like heavy snacking. So if you're feeling cooped up, this makes a fun home date night. It's perfect for quarantine. It helps break up the monotony. We've been loving it. I know a bunch of you have as well, because I know a bunch of you have been ordering it and letting me know that you love the service. That is why they have continued to sponsor. So check out the link in the description below. They have 3 different size boxes at 3 different price points, and you can cancel it at any time, but it's a ton of fun. Let's go ahead and move on with the rest of the list though. Now my next pick will be your new favorite movie for a very small group of you. Any of you that love sort of oddball fantasy movies, movies like Labyrinth, but are okay with lower budget movies, Ink is a really fantastic low budget sort of sci-fi fantasy thing. It's a beautiful movie, but it doesn't look like a lot of big budget movies. This is done very cheap. I happen to feel that they did a killer job with little to no budget. I mean, a really impressive job. But if you're not used to watching movies like that, the look of this can be off-putting. It does look cheap at times. If you're used to that though, this is a surprise of a movie. It's a mind bender of a movie. It's got some really clever, creative visuals all throughout it, and it's kind of got a good touching story at the core. In terms of darkness, this one does go to a dark place because it deals with these sort of like nightmare creatures, but it's the most positive natured one out of all the ones on this list because they're all dark to some degree, but this is the one that is gonna make you feel gross the least, if at all, really. This really kind of is a beautiful movie ultimately. It's a total hidden gem. If you love the way I've described it and you love little hidden gem indie movies, there's a very good chance this could be your new favorite flick. My number 4 pick is Kalifornia with a K. This is one of Brad Pitt's earliest movies and one of the very few movies in which he plays a bad guy, and he plays a pretty good bad guy.
Think I gotta kill you, Walter. How you feel about that?
Not so good. You sure you have to?
Don't know. Wish you did.
Really, please me.
Shut up!
It's a road trip movie. David Duchovny's in it. Him and his girlfriend pick up Brad Pitt's character and his girl, and they're going across the country, and it was a total fuck up. Like, they should not have picked this guy up. He's an absolute maniac. He only gets worse throughout the entire trip. You'll probably never look at Brad Pitt the same way again, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like I said, he kills it in this role. If you're maybe one of my younger viewers and you've never heard of or seen this movie, it's a cool flick. This is one of the ones on the list that a lot of people like, that kind of appeals to a broader audience than most of these not for everyone movies. It still can be pretty off-putting. Brad Pitt does some nasty stuff that, again, you cannot unsee. But if that sounds remotely interesting to you, this is a cool flick that you may have missed from the 90s. Now, Frailty has a cult following, but that's because we're getting up into the top picks here. This one stars and was actually directed by Bill Paxton. It's one of the very few movies he ever directed, and I believe the first movie he ever directed. Matthew McConaughey actually has a really cool role here. This is a horror movie. It's kind of a by-the-book horror movie, slightly, and then it takes this weird turn and becomes its own thing, and I like it. I remember the first time I watched it, just not being confused by what I saw, but being confused by what kind of movie was this? What was I supposed to get from it? And then once I kind of realized that it is a little bit of a fantasy thing, a little bit, I was like, oh man, that's really cool. Like, that's a clever concept, and I've liked this movie ever since. I've watched it multiple times. It's a good watch. It's disturbing. It's dark. I don't want to say too much because you're going to be surprised by it, but if you like very old school horror movies that have like an interesting twist, Frailty is going to be a must watch for you. Now, my number 2 pick is another one that I'll recommend for the most people, and it is a hidden gem, which is why it lands here at number 2, because it's a strong recommendation. It's called These Final Hours, and it's an Australian flick about the end of the world. Now, there are plenty of movies about the end of the world, but this one is literally about the impending doom of an asteroid hitting Earth, and it's a global killer. Everyone knows they're gonna die. Bruce Willis is not in a spaceship trying to blow this thing up. There's no efforts to stop it. There's nothing that can be done. All the crime and everyone going crazy for the most part, has sort of subsided because it literally is like the last 12 hours or so before this thing hits. And while you do see how a lot of people are choosing to live their final day, you really do follow one guy who sort of gets saddled with this young girl who needs help, and that's the story that you follow. And along the way, you encounter plenty of other people and you see how they're living it. So it's dark-natured because everyone's about to die, but it's also a very interesting take on that genre, because usually those movies go in a very different direction, and it was refreshing to see something so different. Now, before getting to my number 1 pick, let's talk about some honorable mentions. And no, Butt Boy is not my number 1 pick. Yes, it's on Prime. Yes, it's not for everyone. Yes, it's dark. I do not recommend that movie. But my honorable mentions is a Robert Pattinson double feature with The Lighthouse and High Life, 2 really cool flicks. I know a lot of people saw The Lighthouse because it got a ton of press. People either loved it or hated it. This is actually from the director of The Witch. It is dark, it's wild, it feels kind of like Stanley Kubrick or something at times. It's really twisted and, again, just dark and wild. Totally fits the bill here because it's not for everyone, but I've talked about it on the channel recently, as well as High Life. In this one, he's on a spaceship with a small crew. It's basically a laboratory, and they're trying to do like in vitro fertilization on it and some other weird stuff, but then there's this like sex room, and this one character is almost like kind of a witch. She seems like she's practicing witchcraft on this spaceship at times. And it's pretty highbrow, but I found it to be really interesting. I do recommend it if you like those sort of smarter indie flicks that maybe leave you hanging a little bit. High Life is a cool one. I dug it, but again, just if you watch any of these and don't like them, I get a free pass on this particular video because I'm warning you, these are not for everybody. And then my number one pick is one of the darkest movies I've ever seen. One of. It's called The Horseman. I know it's a hidden gem. It's very rarely, if ever, talked about. This is a revenge movie from Australia. Did not intend to have Australian movies in my top 2, but that's how it fell on this one, and they're both great. But The Horseman is about a father who is just on a warpath. Something awful has happened to his daughter. And no, this isn't like Liam Neeson trying to get his daughter back. She is gone, and he is furious. And he is not just capable. Like, this isn't a guy who's like ex-Mossad or knows Krav Maga or anything. He is just ruthless. He's armed with a pocket knife at one point. He's armed with pest control at one point. He's armed with gasoline, a sledgehammer. It is rough stuff, and there's very brutal imagery in this one, and it's really pretty gut-wrenching for most of it. In fact, I don't think there's much levity in this one at all, so you do want to be in the right mood, but I found this one to be an incredible thriller. I've watched it several times over the past couple of years. I feel like it's really well done. It's extremely gritty and raw. Like, the way it looks is just rough and raw. And that's what I really dug about it. This one is a strong recommendation unless you have a weak stomach. I'm telling you, because it is rough, but if that sounds interesting to you, definitely check out The Horseman. Make sure you get the right one. Make sure you get the one with almost nobody recognizable in it from Australia. Here's what the cover generally looks like, because there are several movies by that name. But that is it for the list. Let me know in the comments below what you're most looking forward to watching, as well as some additional recommendations you think we should all watch. You can also thank the Patreon supporters. If you want to become a Patreon supporter, there's a link in the description below, as well as the Universal Yums link, a channel membership link, and some links to some other Prime Video lists so that you never run out of good movies to watch. But I will keep making videos like this one as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for watching this episode, and you will see me on the next one.